Good evening, everyone. I'm Shane Herrera, president of BASE at Virginia Commonwealth University. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the VCUarts faculty lecture this evening with Paul Rucker. Paul is a visual artist, composer, and musician who often combines media, live performance, sound, original compositions, and visual art. His work is the product of a rich interactive process through which he investigates community impacts, human rights issues, historical research, and basic human emotions surrounding a particular subject matter. Much of Paul's work currently focuses on the prison industrial complex and the relationship between incarceration and slavery. Paul performed and exhibited virtual visual art exhibitions across the country, including schools, active prisons, and inactive prisons such as Alcatraz, and has collaborated with educational institutions to address the issues of mass incarceration. Paul is a Guggenheim Fellow, TED Senior Fellow, Rauschenberg Fellow, and an iCube Arts Research Fellow at Virginia Commonwealth University. Currently, he is Assistant Professor and the Curator for Creative Collaboration for VCUarts and Virginia Commonwealth University. He is also the mentor for BASE and the William Corcoran Visiting Professor for Social Practice at George Washington University.
Thank you, Shane. Thanks for that introduction, and thank you all for being here. I want to first introduce the panel before we get into it. This is Shane Herrera, who just introduced me. He's the president for BASE, which is Black Art Student Empowerment at Virginia Commonwealth University. And we also have Winston, who's the vice president of BASE, Neil Prince, who's program coordinator and PR chair of BASE. Thanks for raising your hand there, Neo. We have Kevin Patton, professor of interactive design at George Washington University, Caitlin Santiago, who's majoring in interactive design at George Washington University, and Andrew Kastner, social practice. He's in my social practice class, but he's studying exhibition design at George Washington University. Where to begin? I know there's a lot of celebration right now. A lot of people feel like they just reached the touchdown and, the finish line, and that there was a victory. And I love small victories, but I want to caution everyone. And this is coming from a place of, I've made more work about Black death at the hands of police than any artist on this planet. It's not a brag, it's just a fact. I've studied these deaths from Eleanor Bumpurs in the 1980s, this elderly woman living in New York who had her door knocked down by the police and who was shot with a shotgun once in the heart and once in the hand. To our most recent, Breonna Taylor and that acquittal. Amadou Diallo shot 41 times. Sean Bell shot 50 times. Sandra Bland murdered. So I think people, again, are happy about what's happening today with the conviction. And we still need to see if there's not going to be any kind of change with this, because there are people that were involved in the Danziger Bridge shooting in Louisiana who were supposed to go to jail, who haven't spent a single day in jail yet, who were convicted. So I live and breathe this every day. I think about it all the time. As a Black male in America, I just took a walk earlier. And I'll take a walk tomorrow, and I'm not going to feel any safer because of the conviction that happened today. So I just want to get real about that. And do we have an opportunity? Yes, but we've had many, many opportunities. I was just talking a few minutes ago about on my 24th birthday, April 29th, 1992, LA riots or uprising happened. Rodney King was beat on video, and all of the officers were acquitted. More than $1 billion in damage to LA. Many people arrested, many people injured, and several deaths because of the uprising. I don't know exactly, I feel numb because this conviction is not going to bring George Floyd back. No conviction, even the death penalty for Chavez, is not going to bring George Floyd back, or Breonna Taylor, or anybody back. an eye for an eye doesn't work. It just doesn't, it never has, and it never will work. And I know you came here to hear about banking while black, but it's really not about banking. It's about economic violence. It's about the opportunity, not just to be able to own a business and to be able to fairly compete against other people. It's about being able to walk down the street safely without fearing that someone's going to pick you up. I read an article today about Seattle police using the helmet laws to go after homeless people, bike helmet laws. They disproportionately go after Black people on bikes, 4 times more likely to get stopped riding a bike if you're Black in Seattle or if you're homeless. So the time of this, I want to think today about Sicknick, the white police officer, the Capitol police officer, who's also not going to see justice because his death has been ruled natural causes, even though we saw him sprayed with bear spray. We saw him fighting off these rioters, this insurgency, this insurrection. So no one's really going to be charged with murder for that officer. Yesterday was the anniversary of the death of Freddie Gray. I was in Baltimore in my first show, Rewind, my first show of the Klan Ropes, and went up in 2015 in February, and Freddie Gray was murdered in April. He died 6 years ago yesterday. Those 6 officers, not a single one of them was convicted of his murder. So let's talk about economic violence. Before I start, I want to think about Ida B. Wells, the great anti-lynching crusader. I want to remind people why she got into anti-lynching. She started not because her friends were lynched because they were accused of murder or rape. She had 3 friends that opened a grocery store, the People's Market. 3 Black friends opened a grocery store, and it was a successful grocery store, and it competed against the white market down the street. So what happened, people at the white market picked up the 3 Black people who ran the People's Grocery Store and lynched them. And no one was ever convicted for those lynchings. It was just commonplace. So I want to talk a little bit about the project Banking While Black. I'm going to share a screen with you and share a slideshow with you. And is this coming through okay? Okay, great. I did a show once, and I had I think actually it was with VCU, and I think I was going for like 10 minutes, and people didn't see the screen, but people didn't, they were too weirded out to actually say anything about it. But Banking While Black, I realized that it probably should have had another name. It should be more about thriving. It should be more about opportunity and having the same opportunity as others without fearing any kind of harm or danger. And a big part of this project is actually addressing the misnomer. For many years, it was called the Tulsa Race Riots, as if people were fighting back and forth. It was about Black folks fighting white folks. It was actually a massacre and destruction of Black community. And fortunately, our wonderful source of information, Wikipedia, has updated it to say massacre when it should be massacre instead of calling it a riot. And again, banking or thriving while Black, and thinking about the different methods of control, and economic violence is one of those methods of control. So, stories not told. What preceded the Tulsa massacre? Can we focus beyond the 2 days? And that's what we're really working on with the Banking While Black project. And one of those things is actually highlighting the other Black Wall Streets that happened, that were in existence, which was Richmond, Virginia, where we are right now, at least where I am right now, and some of you are here, and Durham, North Carolina. They were the other Black Wall Streets. And there were other thriving Black communities all across the country, self-contained Black communities that we'll talk about later. But the narrative you're going to see at the end of this month is going to really focus on this. the destructive images. And I'm not going to spend much time on this because I don't need to re-traumatize folks. But this is what people are going to focus on at the end of this month. This is Tulsa after the massacre. We're talking about 35 square blocks of Black community, successful Black community. 800 Black people were admitted to the hospital. More than 6,000 Black people were arrested and held, some for days. And more than 10,000 Black people left homeless after this. People made postcards to commemorate this event. This is the destruction. Again, this is what you're going to hear a lot about. This is part of the arrest that happened. And you're just arrested for being Black, no other reason. This is the rest. They're going to the convention hall. You know, as they put Tulsa race riot. This is the second day. So May 31st, June 1st. Even burning churches. The white mob burned churches. Yep, just destruction. So the narrative beyond the 2 days. Here's the thing that we're not taught in school. Here's the narrative that we don't focus on. For the anniversary of Black Wall Street, we should be showing these pictures. For our curriculum across the country, we should be showing these pictures. We're showing an image of wealthy Black folks who are in a self-contained community that was thriving, that did amazingly well. And this picture doesn't tell the whole story. I mean, there were 600 businesses, 21 churches, 21 restaurants, 30 grocery stores, 2 movie theaters, 6 private planes, hospital, bank, post office, schools, libraries, law offices, and even a bus system. I don't know why it has explanation points, because I'd be more impressed with 6 private airplanes with explanation points, if you know what I mean. So why isn't this narrative talked about? Why do we talk about Durham? C.C. Spalding, John Merrick. John Merrick went from being a slave to being a millionaire. That's a story. This is his former house in the top right, and this is his house later. From a slave to a millionaire. This is the bank in Durham. I'm just going to go through these images because I really want to get to talking. Black Wall Street, Durham. I just want to show you just more images, amazing images. I'm glad someone had the foresight to actually just take these images so we can actually see. In our own Maggie Walker, I am a block off of Broad Street right now. I live a block off of Broad Street, not far from where Maggie Walker's bank was, not far from where the historic site is, and not far from where the current statue is. First Black female president, actually first female president of bank in this country. I didn't hear about her until I moved to Richmond. Why is that? This is a shot of her bank. This is the Maggie Walker St. Luke Penny group. And just want you to just see the images. I don't even need to say anything. Thriving. This is absolutely one of my favorite shots. I love this shot. Just styling. How good do you feel being self-sustaining? How good do you feel being able to walk down the street and hold your head high? Just more images of the Black Wall Streets. And I really want to talk about how we remember things. We have these monuments, we have these historic markers that we have in places, but they never tell the full story. They never tell about urban renewal, which is Negro removal. They never tell you about systemic racism or policies that pretty much destroy these communities. Right now, there's a single nice Black neighborhood in the whole country. For the past 5 years, I've been offering scholarships. I'll give you a full scholarship if you can tell me where 10 city blocks are located that's Black owned, that has thriving Black businesses. It doesn't exist. Give me a place that's 95% Black owned. I can definitely show you some places that are 95% white owned. Definitely. So, how are locations marked? Is that all the story? Of course not. I want to throw some dates by 30th of October 1st, 1919, in Elaine, Arkansas. It was during Red Summer. During Red Summer of 1919, which coincidentally happened after the last pandemic of 1918, there were race massacres, not just race riots, but race massacres across the country in 38 different locations where Black communities were destroyed. And Elaine, Arkansas is one of the most egregious examples of this abuse of an unaccountable murder. In Elaine, Arkansas alone, there's an estimated 250 murders that happened by lynchings of Black men, 250. And some estimates have it as high as 800, which would be more deaths, recorded deaths, than Black Wall Street. Yep, someone said there's some feedback on my mic. Is it maybe because I'm saying too loud? Is it okay now? I'll just calm down a little bit. It's just a little emotional today. Rosewood, Florida, another thriving community, a self-sustained Black community. It was an unsubstantiated rumor that a Black man attacked a white woman. It was used as an excuse to burn the community down and kill 150 Black people were murdered. And that's January 1st, 1923. Let's see if you know the next one. October 11th, 1898, Wilmington, North Carolina. It was an insurrection. It was a coup. It was a successful coup. You think January 6th was unusual? The day before October 11th, 3,000 white supremacists got together. They did not like the direction of the government that was going in because Black people were in power and they were getting positions in office. And these group of white men did not like Negro rule. And also there were white women involved in this group as well. But basically, this was a successful overthrow of the government during that time. And they basically put the Black politicians on the train north with armed guards to make sure they would stay on the train. More than 300 Black people were killed in this location as well. More than 2,000 Black people left behind their property and businesses because they were going to be killed if they did not leave during that time. And 1898, May 13th, 1985. Not that long ago. I was a junior in high school, but I remember this incident really well. There was an organization, Black organization called MOVE, and they were trying to serve warrants to some of the people in the community in Philadelphia. And the folks resisted. We're talking, they sent out 500 police cars, 500 helicopters. They shut the water off to the building. They shut the power off. There were women, children, and adults in this building. And basically a helicopter flew over and they dropped 2 bombs on the building, killing 11 people, 6 adults and 5 children. And the police did this, by the way, and there were no convictions or no charges ever brought up against policemen for that use of power. I don't know where to even begin with this discussion because I probably changed the tone a great deal than just about banking while Black. But I think the money aspect is important because George Floyd was accused of trying to pass a $20 bill. So for someone to lose their life or to be murdered over a possible counterfeit $20 bill, it's not about the counterfeiting. It's about a system of oppression where the average white family in America has a net worth that's 10 times Black families. It's the factor that the average net worth of a Black female in New England is $5. Net worth, we're talking, you take in debt into account and assets, is $5. If you want to take into account that a Black woman Women with an associate's degree is less likely to get a job than a white woman who dropped out of high school. We're talking about a lot of factors around economic violence, which a lot of this is really about. It's not just banking, it's about thriving. So I want to open up this discussion now a little earlier than planned and just talk a little bit about with the panelists about the Banking While Black project and your thoughts of the long-term impact of these um, events of the past, not just Black Wall Street. And I actually want to I'm going to put you on the spot, Neo. Could you start by saying what your thoughts are as far as the long-term impact?
Yeah, so my is the mic good now? Trying to make sure my audio is good. All right, great. Um when Paul actually first brought this topic to us in our one of our meetings, I was very passionate about answering it in that moment. And the reason being was because I actually think about things similar to the economic stability of being Black in America. And I base it off of Black Wall Street and the ways Paul has done an extraordinary job of helping to educate us on these things, and also just to get our mind into that focus, because I think it's important when you're aware of these things, not only to just be aware and take it as face value, but also enter into that research yourself, enter into that space yourself, and venture to see what's there. And so my first thought was the Black imagination when he said this. And for those who aren't aware, the Black imagination, and we people are always like probably like, oh my God, y'all put Black in front of everything. No, it's not even about that. When you talk about race in general in this country, when you talk about anything, you can probably trickle every single thing down back to race in some aspect, when we talk about different things that we could see in our households or whatever. And when we talk about imagination in the sense of Blackness, for Black people in this country, we have this burden of being able to see our imagination differently compared to our white counterparts in society. As a white person, there is a privilege in waking up each and every day and recognizing that you probably don't even recognize it, but recognizing that you have the power to do whatever you want to do in this country. And 9 times out of 10, there's things that you can actually do and get away with that a Black person could not. You're able to get jobs much easier than a Black person and do things and venture into different, forms of careers other than Black people. And we have a disadvantage to that, side of that. So with Black Wall Street, I posed this question: what if Black Wall Street was able to flourish in these areas? If we look at it, Black influence right now, we can see that TikTok is like a huge, form of that. If we look at, my generation, and specifically, I'm 20 years old, so you can kind of figure that out. Our generation uses TikTok as a way to show our creativity, and the influence of Black creators is one of the biggest spans of influence on TikTok. And when you see that, you're like, oh my God, like you can create one video and millions of people see it within, hours possibly. But you also see the influence of things being taken, such as white creators forming their own videos of the same videos of Black creators. One of the biggest ones was the Renegade dance. I'm not even going to go into depth about that. Do your research. However, I will say that within the Black imagination, we have so much that we cannot think of or think is fallible or applicable or attainable for ourselves. When I'm growing up as a child, I don't see these Black people in certain positions, like in media or in business or in engineering, in these ways that other white people are. And my imagination can't venture into that because of my skin color. When I first moved to Virginia, I actually went to a private school that was predominantly white, and I think, one out of 3 Black kids at this school. And mind you, this school wasn't just like 2 grades; it was kindergarten through, I believe, 8th grade, if I'm not mistaken. So you can do the math in that, but it was very hard to recognize my own Blackness. At one point, I actually asked my mom to cut my own hair because my hair was long. I'm a Black child, so I had long hair at one point. And I asked her to cut my hair because they would call me a girl. I actually got bullied in these things, and I don't want to change the subject too much. But, there are things like that cause such a drastic and dramatic trauma within Blackness. And so we have these deeply rooted things that go with us throughout our lives. So now sitting at 20 years old, imagine what I think, the things that I can do. I'm much more educated than I was back then, but imagine if my imagination was able to see those things, to actually have something that was the epitome of Black success or Black, prosperity in general, if I was able to see those things. And so what these massacres did, what tearing these things down, what erasing a lot of what Black Wall Street did to the Black imagination is it broke it. It broke the Black imagination in a way that caused such a friction to generational wealth, to the possibilities of things that could happen so quickly within our civil rights movement. Imagine if these businesses were allowed to flourish and grow and also expand. We talk about Durham, Richmond, and Tulsa, Oklahoma, but what if they moved to sites such as, I don't know, Seattle, Washington, Los Angeles, California, wherever we could think of in the United States? If these were allowed to prosper and flourish and grow, the influence would have been there to move these things in other places. The imagination of people going further and farther, the innovation that would have been created. Most Black people have created many inventions that we see today, and a lot of them don't receive the credit that is due. And so there's constantly other things. But from my perspective, the impact that this has had long lasting is that the Black imagination has been broken, and it's very difficult to pick up pieces of something that has already been tattered and destroyed, especially when we sit in a system to where we look at this case of conviction, and we see that yes, it's conviction, we say progress, but we're progressing on top of a system that's built off of unprogressive things. Racism, the system that we live in, is a racist system. So how do we progress in something that is kind of just contradicts itself? So when Paul talks about the caution in praising things like this, it's like, I get it. The system we live in is so racist and so oppressive. How can we even have something that progresses in a positive direction if the system is still stands? That's my take on it.
Thanks, Neil. I just want to mention, I see when you mentioned Seattle, I lived in Seattle for 21 years. I still have a place there, and I lived in a historic Black community. So Seattle had a historic Black community. Most cities across the country had historic Black communities because of segregation, and those communities did thrive, and those communities disappeared. And someone mentioned, and I think in the chat, about the highway running through, or the possibility in Maggie Walker's site being renovated, which I'm excited to hear about. And intergenerational wealth. I mean, there's some good chats coming in, and please put them in the question and answer thing later. But I just wanted to point out that that crippling of imagination is a huge thing. When you don't see it growing up, you don't think could it possibly exist. And anyone else want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I want to add, like, I always heard growing up that Black people can't do that. It's a white thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was and it's not just about like wealth or like professions. It would be like, oh, you can't be gay, that's a white people thing. You can't like rock music, that's a white people thing. And it just is a way to like limit like what Black people can and cannot do. And I just find that that's all I wanted to add. But another way of policing Black people on, and most of what's hurtful is most of the time it's from Black people that say, oh, like you're alternative, that's like a white people thing. And that's why I say like the imagination is broken within the Black community, because it's just like, why can't I do it because of my skin color? Like, why are you saying that to me? But
I think it's the issue of when you don't see, when you go to college and when your professors don't look like you. I mean, I studied jazz at the University of South Carolina, and I didn't have a single Black jazz professor. We're talking about jazz, America's music, America's Black music. And I didn't take that as being unusual then, because going to elementary school, going middle school, high school, I only had a couple of Black teachers the whole entire time. And I mean, I think if you don't see yourselves in those positions, or if you don't see people in those positions, it's more difficult to see yourself in that position. But if we talk about banking, growing up, the branch managers were men and the tellers were women. The doctors were men, the nurses were women, the principals at schools were men, the secretaries were women. I can keep going on. Firemen, always men. Policemen, always men. And I think there's these patterns have changed, but there's been this aspect of assimilation, which is another thing that's another topic that we'd have to talk about later. But I want to get your take, Shane, on any kind of epiphanies or realizations during this project, or the long-term impact of Black Wall Street and the destruction of these communities.
Definitely, for me, like when I read about this now and like think about it, like first I didn't think about it during school because it just wasn't in the history books. A lot of it just starts with slavery. It doesn't say like, like, hey, these were thriving Black communities that, could have grown, and, your imagination, as like Neo and Winston pointed out, this could have been something that, you didn't have to work on. Like for me, I had to work on my imagination. Like I wanted to be an artist when I was young, but, you know, in different communities, it was like, oh, you want to be an artist? Like that's not like I haven't seen that before. Like, oh, what do you mean, like a rap artist? Like, no, I want to be an artist. Um, but in terms of like long-term effects, it definitely like pushes us back in terms of like starting over. And you're not only just starting over, but you're pushed back a couple of steps. So it's like, oh, hey, you start over, and then a lot of times we get like blamed for being lazy, or like Black community gets blamed for being lazy or taking advantage of the system, but um, it's not that they're taking advantage, but a lot of these people have been displaced over generations, that they don't have much of a choice to like get rid of or like try to come out of a certain situation. So I don't like that argument, but yeah, that's really my take on it.
No, thanks,
Yeah.
Shane.
I
Appreciate
just
that.
think, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Winston, please.
I just think that going back to like, oh, I want to be like a visual artist. Like both of my parents are Jamaican immigrants. So they didn't come with like wealth or anything really. They came to America to build that wealth. They didn't build it. Like short story, long story short. But like I told my mom, I was like, yeah, I want to go into art. And she just looked at me and she was just like, didn't you like science or something? Didn't you want to go into that? And I'm thinking about it, and it's because it has monetary value. And when we're talking about Black business, Black acquiring wealth, like I feel that like anything creative or anything that doesn't worth money in a capitalist society isn't as valuable. Because like my parents want me to make money. They came from their country to this country to make money. And I just feel like, we tried it. Like we tried it with Durham, we tried it with Tulsa, like building Black wealth in like our own Black communities. But you see white people get envious and racist and they destroy it. So like it's not, we could like make our own new Black area in like Atlanta or something. But what's to stop white people from coming over and just like wrecking it again? So I feel like we need to look at a new system other than capitalism to see how we can reach equality, because racism and capitalism go hand in hand. But yeah.
Well, we've talked about this many times, and I've been very clear that capitalism was not meant for Black folks in the sense of making money from it. I mean, slaves were the capital in capitalism. Here in Richmond, Virginia, we hear the story about Henry Box Brown, the way he escaped and everything, but he did this special technique of tobacco rolling, so he made his enslaver a lot of money because of his technique and his abilities. I mean, the what would equal trillions of dollars from indigo, rice, tobacco, and the sale of humans. it's just, that was the Microsoft and Google of the time back then. And that's the basis of the wealth today. And you can talk about the monuments being taken down on Monument Avenue, but the real monuments on Monument Avenue are the houses. Those are the real monuments, the monuments of wealth. And that wealth, I mean, there's a disparity, there's an inequity, but I want to talk about shifting the narrative from the destruction of the 2 days that people are going to focus on next month to what we're working on with Kevin with the interactive design class at George Washington. My class there and his class have been working together. My class creating the content with Andrew, who's going to speak in a moment. In Kevin's class, working on interactive design and the website aspect is going to highlight the 3 Black Wall Streets with positive images and showing the thriving and the wealth in the communities that existed, and profiling characters, places, events, and everything, and telling a different story. So we're working on, I know we don't have images and anything. I know probably do have any images, but I really would like to just talk about the process of what was new for you in discovering in this process of creating the Banking While Black interactive website that's going to be completed soon. And I'd like to start with Caitlin. Caitlin Santiago, would you chime in?
Yeah, so my Wi-Fi's been really bad all day. I've been hearing what you all have been saying, but it's been a bit choppy. So if I'm cutting out too, I'm really sorry about that. But working with Paul and working this semester has been really wonderful and also really challenging. Just being very intentional and conscious with every decision that we're making along the way in the class, because there were definitely like reservations. I know I definitely felt very much, this isn't my story to tell. Like, it's not my place to be talking about things like Black Wall Street. Like, this should be being created by other Black artists and things like that. And I think that really through like Paul's leadership on the project and working with our professor Kevin as well and our other classmates, it's like, but the history and experiences of Black Wall Street are also American history. And so like those are things that all of our ancestors took part in if we were here in America. So really creating this experience has just been like challenging and like, eye-opening and really wonderful to be a part of. And I'm very grateful to be in this class, definitely.
Super, thanks. Would you like to comment, Andrew?
Yeah, definitely echo Caitlin's sentiments there, especially about how, I guess for me, coming into working with Paul last semester and this semester, it's just been a lot of sort of listening and trying to understand what Paul wants to say, and like Caitlin said, just following his lead on where to look and what to learn has been really eye-opening. And there are really, really amazing stories, especially my group in particular has been focused on the Black Wall Street in Durham, and understanding the history of the North Carolina Mutual Insurance Company and how the founders of that, Dr. Aaron Moore, C.C. Spalding, and John Merrick, everything they did was community-based, and that ethos built into that community made it what it was. So it's really amazing to see, like, if the leaders in a community really have that kind of mentality, you can build these amazing places. Sort of where I got.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you both, Caitlin and Andrew. Kevin. So Kevin he's interactive design department. Your chair, right?
Well, I direct the program, yes.
Direct the program. And so George Washington. And so we've talked and tried to figure out how to present this. And it's like, trying to figure out a way to aesthetically present this, and we've had a lot of conversations and had a lot of permutations and ideas from the students, and really the students have been really sensitive. But I wanted you to talk on your experience, Kevin, as far as, really getting into actually making this happen.
Well, I mean, I'll talk about the process maybe more than the technical side of it. But I think one of the things is for most of us has been very educational. There's aspects of these histories that many of us and the students had not been aware of. So our intentionality about using design and our design skills and technological skills as a method of amplifying those stories rather than as a method of attempting to kind of take control of that narrative was a big part of the discussions, especially towards the first month of the class. So this really was a really key part, you know, and then like, you know, bringing up and understanding how these histories intersect and how they're still present today was a big part of kind of orienting the project. And it is very true that that everyone talks about the violence, everyone talks about the destruction, everyone talks about the poverty. And so how do we, or how might we in design speak, how might we be able to bring positive stories while still acknowledging that history? And so, and how do we, in our role in this was, how do we do that? How do we do that visually? How do we, and through creating a kind of immersive experience, not VR or AR, but just an immersive kind of world you can explore. And you know, how do we link vintage objects with different with news clippings and images of that period? And how do we allow a user or a visitor to be able to kind of have the freedom to explore these different stories while being intentional about how we connect the different aspects of the kind of protagonists of this era's life. So a lot of the stories that that Paul's class has been collecting are essentially imagery and text around certain individuals in these communities and and what they did. So how do we as designers kind of begin to attach these images so that they make a coherent kind of story? So that was the big challenge, right? So how do we amplify and uplift positivity while not denying or acknowledging the horrible aspects of some parts of those histories?
Thanks, Kevin. And I want to jump right into the questions, but I also want to show a graphic. Someone asked, can you speak to Black ownership in the early 1900s versus today's Black population? Kevin just mapped programs. It's like basically violence against a racial group. And I found this information online and the site was down, and Kevin actually put the information back together. So when we talk about violence against Black communities, we're not just talking about the community was burned down. In many cases, Black communities and Black owners of property were told to leave town before sundown because we're taking your property. And this is, if you're talking about the 1900s, early 1900s, this happened a lot. 1898 with the insurrection in Wilmington, all the way to 1919 when those race massacres happened. So Kevin actually mapped the locations again, and it's not posted yet, but see, every single one of these red dots is a location where coordinated violence happened towards Black people. I mean, it's a pretty amazing map where you can go in and you can click on a location and get more information about that location. And I think even I know a lot about these locations. I've studied these locations. They're still shocking and disturbing to me. So when you speak about Black ownership in the early 19 versus today, you have to put in the variable of white violence against those Black populations. So that I can't, and I know it came from an anonymous attendee, which is my favorite attendee usually. And it's a tough question to ask, but you know, I think when you talk about poverty, it doesn't work. When you talk about inequity, that brings in both parties. It's about the people who are poor and about the people who are rich. So we have to talk about inequity. If we talk about poverty, it's almost like you're blaming the people who are poor on being poor. And you're not talking about outside forces that cause that poverty. In America, poverty is a commodity that's manufactured and systems through predatory practices and other things. But don't want to get too far into that. But I do want to get to all the questions. And there's a question for you, Neil, and I want you to give me a succinct answer to this. I'm going to skip your question, Jeremy, and I'm going to come back to it. But someone asked, Camden, if you don't mind me saying your name, someone speak on the means for repairing one's imaginations. Are there societal models for healing the imagination, individual models? Anyone? Neil?
I would say no. There's no model for repairing an imagination, because to my current knowledge, I guess, or current, intellect, I can't fathom any other imagination that's been broken like Black people's has. I think the healing process, because they mentioned healing and things of that nature. Honestly, I'm not sure, what can be done to heal that, other than, to create a new system. I am definitely a person for abolition of the current system that we're in, to create and defund the things that we're already funding, and creating this new system around equity. But I believe that there has been so much done towards Black people and ongoing. This is not a thing of, oh, since we're knowledgeable today, it starts today and we can move forward and do different things. People have always been knowledgeable about these things and aware. They just don't care. And I made this point a few days ago to someone. I said, if I was, not to say that I want to be, but if I was a white person, nothing, I'm not even going to preface that, but if I was a white person in society today, it would definitely make sense for me not to care about other people in terms of caring about the movement of Black people. Because as a white person, I have privileges that I can do whatever I want, and it's freedom in that. It's freeing to know that you don't have a burden, or this burden of saying, I have to fight for this. I have to survive day to day in this way of, like, I don't know, but as a Black person and living this experience, you are literally walking out the door hell bent on doing your day-to-day tasks, but surviving while doing those things. Right now, one of my jobs I do is DoorDash, right? I drive every single day for DoorDash, and driving on that road and seeing a police car behind you is very jarring. This year, no, not this year, 2020 was the first year I got pulled over. I've been driving since I was 16 legally. I have my license. And first time I got pulled over was in 2020, and it was the most anxiety filled experience. And mind you, the craziest part was I had a dream 2 nights before that I was going to get pulled over by the police. Never gotten pulled over by the police in my life. And I got pulled over because one of my taillights was out, but knowing nothing, I was just driving. I followed the rules of the road, and I was like, what did I do? That's the first thing I thought. What did I do? What mistake did I just make that could cost me my life at this moment? Because it was dark, which made it worse, because in light, you think, oh, police officers, during the day, they're nicer. But it was dark. It was the nighttime. I'm in a neighborhood that's not close to my house, and I just got pulled over. All you see is lights. You're trying to look straight because you're driving and you're doing this parking thing. And it was really just the scariest experience I ever had. And when I tell you, because I was on a DoorDash run at that moment as well, after the police officer came, he was actually very nice. And he was just telling me that my taillight was like, he was like, I'll just check your license and it'll be good to go. I was like, okay. The way I unclenched everything, the relief that I felt after it was all over was immense, but it was exhausting. And it felt as if I was channeling other Black people that have gone through police violence. It felt as if all those images and pictures of seeing police do these things to Black people had rested onto me. And being a Black person, you live in your own identity, but also you have to live with the understanding that other people think that your identity is a monolith, that every Black person lives this specific way, this specific life. But in a sense, you actually embody and take on this mentality of other people around you. And it's very difficult to even recognize that we can have our own individual beliefs and imagination when it's been torn down so many times. So if there's any way to heal it, I would love to hear that from anyone, but I'm not sure I even have an answer to how that process could begin, if it has begun, what things we can truly do. I do believe there's things that can be done to assist in this process, but the imagination is your mental state is very fragile. You can't see it because it's not something physical, it's a mental thing. But living as a Black person, the mentality really, it's so stricken and stressed. It's almost like you taking a stress ball and you're each and every day you wake up, you squeeze it all day long. The moment you walk out that door, you have to squeeze harder. The moment you step in your car, you're squeezing for your life. And by the time the end of the day comes for you to rest, your ball is pretty much, I don't know if it's going to expand anymore because it's been torn so much. So that would be a model that I can use to describe how the Black imagination has been just massacred in a way.
So there's a question, what do you think the effects of integration had on Black people's mentality to be self-sufficient? I think, Neil, you also answered that question as well. I mean, integration also meant, and someone actually has a statement around redlining in the covenants, and I don't know if you know the history of redlining, but it started in Baltimore and followed quickly by Richmond. And redlining wasn't just a Southern thing. Redlining also happened in Seattle, Washington, all across the country, pretty much everywhere. So I think the mentality aspect, it hasn't been good, obviously. And I remember the first time I was pulled over as a young man, and I know it was for something frivolous. Remember Sandra Bland was pulled over for not signaling. I think that was the thing, and she ended up dying. So it's not a good thing. I want to skip around a little more because I want to get to questions. I also want to get statements from everyone before we leave. But someone asked, how can teachers empower Black children? That's a whole nother subject we need to spend a session on, and the unconscious bias that's in our school system. And I think Winston even talked about, you don't see this person doing this career or this job. My teachers did not see me ever probably being a professor at a college when I was in elementary school. They wanted to put me along with the other Black kids in remedial classes. They did not see us as going to college because college wasn't for us. And that's just a fact. So we have to work on the unconscious bias aspect of things. Thank you, Laura Lay. You got to run. I appreciate your comments, by the way. And Black ownership. Yeah, thank you, Kate Fitt, with the information around that. Reparations is, boy, we have a lot of thoughts on that. The issue with reparations, unfortunately, if you were the current system in place, you could give every descendant of slave $1 million. Okay, give every descendant of slave $3 million. With the system the way it's in place right now, it would go back to the white community very quickly. Who runs the banks? Who runs the different systems? Who owns the grocery stores? And if you can't even marijuana in Seattle, it's like people that were arrested for selling small amounts are still in prison right now. And right now, this is a multi-billion, soon to be trillion-dollar industry. So someone wants to hear more on capitalism. And like I said earlier, slaves were the capital of capitalism. We weren't really, it wasn't meant for us. But someone asked a question at the end. So, did you make any discoveries during this researching Black Wall Street? And I do want to answer this question really quick because I've asked this question a lot. Someone asked, what do white people need to do to help? Actually, white people, tell me what you can do to help. That's the real question. White people, you have the power to change the power structure. That's a fact. If you're in a Zoom meeting and you're in a city that's 50% Black, like Richmond, or 63% Black like Baltimore, and there's not a single Black face on the screen making decisions, it's your responsibility to speak up and say, why aren't there any Black people here making decisions? So that's something you can do, but you might not be the most popular white person in your office if you start doing that. Just saying. So we got 5 minutes, and we can continue this conversation later. It's an ongoing conversation on this momentous day. But I want to ask the panelists all, what is something that you discovered? I want to go to Andrew, Kevin, and Caitlin. Something you discovered in the research for Black Wall Street that really surprised you, and during the process of digging pictures and information. Andrew, please.
Yeah, I guess sort of the slow ways in which communities are destroyed too. Thinking about the Tulsa Race Massacre as this sort of flashpoint that everyone's going to be looking back on in the next month. What gets overlooked are urban renewal projects of the 1950s all the way in the 80s that destroyed communities as well. There's no one moment to look at for those necessarily, but if there's a way to, I'm interested in trying to understand that history more and figuring out how to unearth it and show it.
Cool. Thanks, Andrew. Caitlin, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the largest thing that was really like eye-opening for me and surprising for me was just the entire concept of Black Wall Street. Before this class, I had never heard of it or been aware of it. And so just like coming to learn about it was something really huge. And I think also it really pointed me towards like how much growing up, like I grew up here in America, so it's like how much I am not being taught. And like that's really like frustrating and like eye-opening as well. So like I can go through all of K through 12 and all of university education.
Oh shoot, I think we lost you, Caitlin.
And it's like, you know, I'd studied undergrad and I always wondered why, like, are we not reading any Black philosophers? Like, why did I go through 4 years of university education and never read a Black philosopher? And it was just like mind-blowing. So I think definitely just, you know, coming to learn about it and seeing how much it's just not included in our education system was something really eye-opening. And really quickly, I just wanted to say to Neo, I don't know if I'm like cutting out or anything, but when you were speaking, it really like reminded me of something that I've been learning about lately, which is like intergenerational trauma. I've been reading this like book on it, and it's really fascinating how, so like for 3 generations, you, your parents, your grandparents, it's like within your genes, it's called epigenetics, and trauma can be transferred from people, where you can feel fear from things, or you can feel anxieties or like things you've never been exposed to, and then they can just live inside of you. And so it's like we're all like living, our ancestors are living through us even in the present day. So it's really interesting as to how we move forward with those traumas in our genes, basically. Oh, I'll put the name of the book in the chat.
No, thanks, Caitlin.
Could I comment on that for a second?
We got to run out. I want to get Kevin in a minute, but go ahead.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Real quick though, you know.
I'll make it as quick as possible. I'm glad you brought that point up, Caitlin, because that's something that is hugely important. I wanted to also kind of touch the basis of that question that someone asked about what white people could do. It kind of goes hand in hand with that question, with that comment. Because of that trauma, it's harder for Black people to have conversations around race and around these different things. It's harder for us to be as civil as possible. You know, personally, I don't like when people talk at me wrong. They argue with me. You know, if someone is trying to have a conversation, let's have a conversation that's built off of civil discourse and not, you know, agitation. But as a Black person, our constant struggle is that we have to live in this society, and that people continue to choose not to be aware and to fix their wrongs and different things of that nature. So when it comes to the education process, a lot of white people come to us and say, can you educate me? Can you educate me? Can you show me? Google is very free. I've never seen something so free. I learned from my parents. They said nothing is free in this world. Well, Google is one of them things. I'm like, it's pretty free for me to search something on there. So I'm pretty sure that you're able to search things in terms of what things you can do. There are people actually out here that are willing to educate white people on these things, but do not expect or come into a conversation with the expectation that every Black person is going to be willing to have that conversation with you, because not everyone is like that. And so it's hard to, combat that. But you have to be open and willing to learn and listen, even through a hostile conversation sometimes. Not only going to use that word, a very passionate conversation sometimes.
No, thanks for that, Neil. I just want to say 10 seconds. There's a difference between if you have trauma in you and you generational, that's one thing, but to be re-traumatized on a daily basis, that's also another thing. When we've seen these images of Black folks getting shot, I had to stop. I have to stop watching now. So that's also a factor as well. I know we're drifting on. We're going to go over a little bit. If you have to leave, thank you for coming, but we're going to go over a little bit because I want to hear Kevin and also touch on a couple more questions if that's okay. Thank you for those who are taking off. Thanks who came. And yeah, Kevin, please.
Right. So much of this history wasn't new to me. I'm a Gen Xer, so and I'm from Houston, Texas, and I've had lots of opportunities to learn about these histories. By reading books, white people, we can read books. The COINTELPRO book by Ward Churchill, for instance, to education on the FBI targeting of the Black Panther Party and the Black Panther movement is just one of them. And what I found totally mind-blowing about this project, what I learned, was I spent some time going back to old newspaper clippings from around the 20s, right? And the language, minus the epithets, is almost identical. Like the way that people are described, the way that the police are described, it could be transferred right to today. And I mean, even things like that, I found document, and this is all documented. Everyone thought this was normal. I found documentation of one of the police lieutenants in Tulsa that led the riot was suspended for not doing his police job right or something, and then got reinstated, then sued and wrote to the judge to get his back pay for he was suspended for, right? And it's all like right there, and it's all kept in the newspapers and the record. And the other thing I learned, that there's incredible public archives around these histories. So there's a lot of stories that haven't been told. And this project with Paul is really great for telling some of them, but they're endless, and there's so much documentation. There really is. It takes someone to sift through it, but there's a lot of documentation of showing both the good and the bad. And so that's what, to me, the language that we read about, for instance, Derek Chauvin or other murdering police officers, is almost word for word the same sentence structures, same syntax, same contexts, same victim blaming, same all of these things. And it was really, really, that's the part I'm taking out of just how deep it is and how present it still is, despite maybe some superficial progress. But
There's so many good questions and things that are coming through, and there's so many things to talk about. And I think if we really look deeply at confirmation bias, how we live in spaces and see things, and we rationalize inequity without ever questioning it. We rationalize. A gentleman passed by my place today. He was collecting cans. And I happened to have a bunch of cans, and I gave them the cans. But before I went back in my place, I already realized that I was already making up a story for his existence and why he was homeless. And I had to put those thoughts and possibilities out of my head. And because I don't know his story. But I think there's a lot of filling in the blanks of history that we're not taught. And as long as the victors in white supremacy control the narrative in education, when textbooks are made in Texas, I mean, we really have to look at, the very foundation of this country as far as how it was founded, and have some kind of real truth telling of history. And until we do that, we're going to walk around, because I'm going to let you know, as a child, as a small child, I used to wonder why the white neighborhoods look so nice, why the white people had the nicer cars. And in my mind, without saying it, I thought, they must be better. Let's get real. The things that we don't talk about, we fill in the blank with misinformation. And as a child, as a Black child, as a child of color, you think, maybe I'm flawed. But as I got older, I realized that this world is rather flawed. And you look at what happened with COVID, where inequity is highlighted more now than in the history of our lifetime, period. And I know someone put in a question about NFTs, and I went to the talk on NFTs, and I heard a story about more Black people investing in the stock market. If you look at investors, big investors, how much of that actually goes to the Black community or incorporates Black folks? It's not even 1%. Not even 1%. And that's by design. Because there's gatekeepers. There's gatekeepers of systems. And Black people and people can feel good about movies like Black Panther. But if you go to the board of Walt Disney and see who's around the table, no one looks like Black Panther. And as Disney lays off tens of thousands of the poorest workers while giving the richest workers and the head folks more bonuses, this is the country that we have. And I know someone wanted to talk more about capitalism. And I don't know, Winston, can Black people benefit from capitalism? Can we?
No.
Okay, thanks. Now that's the answer we want, Nia. That's the short answer. Go ahead.
As I was saying like earlier in the conversation, we just need to find Black people shouldn't. I wouldn't say I don't want to speak in like a monolith, but I feel like I shouldn't say we, but like Black people shouldn't participate in capitalism. Like I don't want another Black billionaire. I don't want another Jay-Z. Like it just doesn't make sense when someone is a billionaire and there's still people that do not have homes to sleep in. So I just feel like capitalism just needs to like that gate. Like I don't think we should be in it, and I think we need to figure out a new system or like just massive restructuring. But yes.
Oh, thanks for that, Winston. And yeah, there's a lot of someone just asked, anonymous, that's my favorite person to ask, by the way, it said, do you see any potential for co-creating honest stories through processes of interracial conversation in any form? I think there's a lot of, we're going to end with this. There's a lot of performative activism out there. Again, it doesn't matter if we take down every monument or change the name of every street that's named after an enslaver. If we don't have policy changes that change the systems to address inequity, kind of what Winston's talking about, you have, to me, Jay-Z and Oprah, they're small billionaires. I think we went over the billionaires, the Black billionaires. Was it Rihanna? She was up there. But that's still small compared to Bezos, Elon Musk, Facebook, and the white guys. They're all white guys. And it's the same thing with the late night television show. The hosts are, they're supposedly pretty progressive, but they're all white guys. Can Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, and the other guys that are white get together and say, you know what, we're all white guys. Can we make space for a person of color, a woman? Can we do that? I think the hypocrisy of the left and progressives are a big factor that we really have to look at in this whole thing, because thinking that they're not complicit in this system. But I want to give everyone a chance to give final thoughts before we go, and we're going to go around. And Neo, I want you to go first, but I want you to keep it short. You got final thoughts, two sentences, 2 to 3 sentences. Go.
All I'm going to do is comment on what you just said about the talk show hosts. The disparity or something I observed was, I think Lisa is her name, Liza Koshy, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. When she created her talk show, there was a lot of backlash, more backlash than I've seen in any other talk show. but she's a woman of color. And when she created hers, there was plenty of backlash. And that's all I'll say compared to what you receive from the others.
Exactly. Let's go to left of you, Shane, president of BASE, please.
Yeah, for me, I'll just like touch on like a thing that I don't know, it's been like on my mind for a bit. I was like talking with my partner. I was like watching a thing like this, like a discussion, and basically like the things that we're saying like right now and the information that's being like projected, a lot of times it doesn't reach the audience that it needs to reach. Um, so like I said, it's like allies, and for other white people, it's just to grab someone else when you decide to go to something like this as well. And share the information as well, because we could be talking about really great stuff here, but if the people that need to hear it don't hear it, then you know it doesn't spread. It doesn't get to those people. So that's what I have to say.
Thanks. Let's go to Vice President Winston.
Dismantle capitalism, abolish the police. And I would also like to say that, white people, I feel like it starts in the home. Like I had a white partner and, like they kind of trick you. Like they say they're progressive, but like they really aren't. They didn't really grapple with things. So I'm just asking white people to be uncomfortable. Like do something that doesn't bring you comfort. Stand up for someone when you have no benefit for it. And that's what I'll say.
And that kind of goes back to the conversations. We can't have comfortable conversations, or actions really. Let's go to Andrew. Final thoughts.
I guess just thanks, Paul, for having me on this panel. And I guess I don't feel like I don't have anything specific to say, but I'm glad to have listened to all of you today.
That's one of the best things you could say. Caitlin.
Oh, it's cutting out for me, sorry. But I just wanted to say that I really appreciate being able to be a part of this discussion today, and have really enjoyed being able to meet everyone. And that I think a great conversation to have is also about like mental health and like the education system sort of roles there. So, but I appreciate being able to be here today.
Appreciate you again. Yeah, Kevin Patton.
Yeah, hi again. Thank you. And it's been a really great experience to work with you, Paul. And we've had some great conversations. It's really, the project has been super, super interesting, and I've learned quite a bit. And I just want to thank all the panelists for their testimony and for, telling people how you feel and experience. For those that maybe don't know, it takes bravery to do such things. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you to Kelly, who's hidden behind the thing, and to Bob, who has this asterisk symbol up there, who's hiding his name that way. And thanks to you all panelists again. You guys did great. I wanted to change the format, other than me just standing up here and just going through a bunch of slides and saying things, just giving information. I think it's important to hear your voice now. And so to say, please join us May 4th for the final lecture in the series, Virtual Production, Visual Effects, and Future Filmmaking with Communication Arts colleague Matt Wallen. And I say thank you and good night, but I'm not just going to say thank you and good night. I want to say stay vigilant, and, the only reason I got to where I am right now is I was naive. People told me I couldn't do what I've done. I'm going tomorrow to the VMFA to install my show this opening this weekend. I was too naive to think that I couldn't do it. I didn't listen to anybody. So my Black imagination didn't get totally crippled. But I don't want to be used as an example of someone who can make it and do something, because for the most part, it's been damaged. No matter how well I'm doing, it's been damaged. And I don't want us to accept these little victories as the finish line or the goal, we gotta expect a whole lot more than today, a whole lot more. On that note, thank you very much, and y'all take care and love yourself.